Well, good morning, everybody. This is Dr. Heldman coming to you with another Tech Talk Education video. In this video, we're going to continue going through our Mutillidae installation. If you need help on that, I recorded an entire movie on how you can download Mutillidae II into your Kali Linux distro and then install it. It's a set of Docker containers that you can use to run this. And today what we're going to do is we're going to begin talking about a pretty interesting subject. It's called Structured Query Language Injections, SQL or SQL injections. So let's get started. This should be very informative and a lot of fun. So there are two kinds of data sources. There's one that's called structured, and there's one that's called unstructured. You can think of unstructured data as a blob of data that hasn't been identified or labeled yet. It's just a bunch of data sitting out there. On the other hand, structured data is an area where we have put data into specific rows and columns, and so we know what every piece of data is. SQL is designed to work with structured data. So I want to show that to you real quickly so you can see what that looks like. I'll just talk about the basic naming here, the naming constructs, how we do this, and then we'll move on from there. So I'm going to go to File, and I'm going to tell it that I want to open something, and I'm going to open this sample data CSV. Now CSV stands for comma separated value, and what this is this is a text file where everything is just text and it's all been separated by commas here, like this. I'm just double clicking these columns to widen them out to their appropriate width, whatever will fit the name, the length of the largest sentence inside the column. And here on the top row, you can see that we have what is called a header row. So this is going to be the employee ID, and then we have these column names. These are all column names. This is the employee ID, full name, job title, and so forth. So the way that tables work, this is a data table. Excel has used tables forever. And the idea is that we can give a column a name and then specific data goes inside that particular column. Then we have what's called a data row, a table row, and the row contains one piece of data about one select piece of information. So in this case, the row is about Emily Davis here. So tables consist of columns which describe the data, rows which describe one unique set of data. One other thing you should know about is that when you're working with dates, or we're working with things like percentages here, this could be difficult to work with in databases. They all have their peculiar ways of working with dates especially, so you'll need to pay attention to that. But anyway, the way that the SQL command construct works is this. It's going to work like this. So you type, the first command you have is a select statement. These are called statements. So you say select, and then you tell it what you want to select. Now this is where the header rows come into play. So you have to know each of the names of these header rows. These really aren't named very well, if I'm being honest with you. Let me slide this off to the side and I'll show you how I would do this. I wouldn't call this full name. I would go ahead and edit this thing here and I would call it something like F name or just name, and then title like so, and department, business unit, business underscore unit, gender is fine. I would stick with these all lowercase, and because you want to, when you're going to issue a SQL statement, you don't want to have to mess around with, uppercase letters, bonus, country, city, and exit date. I think this one here, EEID, is fine, but I think I'll go ahead and lowercase it like so. So this header row now has been made to a point where we can use SQL with it, and it's easier for us to get out the names of these columns. So let me bring this back here now. Now I'm going to show you the header row as well. So let's say that we wanted to go after this record for Emily Davis. What we would do is we would tell the system what data we want. So we select the various columns that we want. So we might say that I want EEID, comma, and then her name, comma, and then, let's go ahead and look for her business unit. So we're going to get 3 columns worth of data. That's the first part of the SQL statement, is what is called the select clause. It's called a clause. And then we say select from, and we have to give it the name of the table. Now in this case, the table's name is employee sample data. Now in Excel's case, it could be down here, employee sample data, either way. But in an actual production database, we would be worried about what the table name is. This is something that's really, really important. Bad guys really want to get at the table names and the header, the column names, so that they can query this data. They have to know these names of these column headers as well as the table names so they can query the data once they get in. So this is important for us to know. So we're going to say that we're going to take this from employee sample data. Now I'm putting a tick around that because when we have multiple words inside a table name, which is not a good idea, we're going to go ahead and put ticks around it so that the system knows it's a string. And then we have a where clause, so we can say where, and what we can do now is say name equal, or there's operators like or as, and we're going to say put in ticks again, Emily Davis, tick. And then there are a couple of other clauses. So there's a clause called order by, and there's a clause called group by. There are others, but that's the basics of it. It's not super hard once you realize that what we've got here is we're dealing with tables. We typically have the top row as the header row, so this is what is giving us the names of the columns here. And the name of the column also indicates the type of data that column contains. And this is why we call it structured data, because it's not going to change. We always expect this kind of data inside this particular column. And then we have we have the rows here which describe a piece of data, one row, one record, they call it, of data that describes one entry into the database. And then the commands are pretty easy. Select from, where, order by, and group by. Now there's one other thing that I want to show you before we actually get into the Mutillidae SQL, our first SQL injection. And that is that if you go out to w3schools.com, I love this site. These guys are so good. They've been around quite a while. They keep adding to this thing. It's very, very good. It's hands-on learning. It's web-driven, so you don't have to install anything on your local computer, and you can learn a ton of stuff. It used to be that they only taught web dev, so it was like just these basic guys over here, HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. And then they began to add things like Python and Java, C, C++, C#, and so forth. Even some JavaScript over here, some other JavaScript helper stuff like React. But look at here. Here is an entire SQL class. SQL is not hard to learn. It's only a handful of commands. But what the value that you have when you know SQL is you understand how the databases are put together and how to issue commands to those databases. Now, a bad guy going out and getting into a database, for example, recently the AT&T database, there were 60 million records that were stolen and they were sold to the dark web. Well, how did they do that? Well, the bad guys went in and they found a hole inside a database. They got in, they queried the database to find out the names of the tables. Then they went and they got a description of what the column names were, and then they were able to issue SQL commands that went ahead and extracted that data and moved it somewhere else. So it's actually not too bad if the data has not been hardened, if the tables and stuff have not been hardened. So it's well worth your while to know about SQL. And if I were you, I would also look into learning about a product like MySQL, PostgreSQL. There are some really, really good classes, because once you know how one structured database works, like say Postgre or MySQL, then you can know about how basically all of the databases work, with the exception of some little quirks here and there the way that a database does dates and times, things like that. So that's worth your while to learn. All right, so now the easy part, and it's going to take you a little bit to learn SQL. I like it a lot. It's easy to learn. You definitely need to know how these different databases work, some of their nuances, things like that, because you understand that, especially in cybersecurity, we're concerned about bad guys getting into these databases. Listen, if they can go in to AT&T, hack into a database and get data out of it, that's something we need to be concerned about. So now I'm going to do an LS, and I see here that I have Mutillidae Docker installed. We've talked about this in other videos and also how to install it. There's a video on how to install it locally. I have it running locally here because when I was trying to teach Mutillidae I running inside Metasploitable II, the Mutillidae didn't work very well. There were some results I wasn't getting back that I expected to get back. So I discovered that there was a Mutillidae II, and it's available in a Docker edition. So we downloaded that and installed it, and I have a whole movie on how you do that. Now I'll do an ls, and we realize that we have to do a sudo docker compose up, like so. Type in my Kali password, and this will go ahead and start the actual the database for us. Now this thing is using a database here. It's using Apache Web Server, and I think it is using it's using MariaDB. It just slipped by there really quickly. Let me show that to you if I can get it here. MariaDB is a newer takeoff on MySQL. So MySQL is really, really interesting. It's an open source database. It's very, very, very popular. These databases are expensive. So if you're going to run Oracle in a production environment, it's going to cost a lot of money, and as is Microsoft SQL Server. So this open source solution for databases really took hold, and it came about with MySQL. And then now there's MariaDB, which is I don't know how you would describe that. It's a takeoff of MySQL. Anyway, I'll minimize this, and I'll go ahead and bring up Firefox. Now, we can use Firefox for this. We don't need to do anything fancy in terms of using, like Burp Suite or something like that in this case. I'm going to go out to 127.0.0.1, and my lab responds. Okay, now here's the two parts that we have to do. So we go into labs. We don't need how the web works anymore because we've already done all of those. Now we're going to go into SQL injection. And we're going to go for lab 6 testing for SQL errors. And it asks us a question. So it says we need to refer to the user info page here. And then it wants to know about a PHP file. Well, okay, now this has gotten a little more complicated. So as you're going through W3 schools, it's probably worth your while to take a PHP class as well. PHP is a programming language that is used on the back end of web servers. So the PHP is doing the server intelligence to run the server so that you can interact with it. And so PHP is something that you probably should learn. It's going to be something that you need to know. Now it gives us a list of files here. It wants to know which PHP file, so I guess we could rule out the JavaScript file here. It's a giveaway, but anyway, they're showing us that we've got some PHP files, MySQL handler, user info, constants, index, and then there's this JavaScript file, ddssmoothmenu.js. Yes, it's important for you to know JavaScript as well. Here's why this is all important. In the world of web dev, HTML is doing the semantics of the page, Cascading Style Sheet is doing the design of the page, JavaScript is doing the intelligence of the page, and then PHP is acting on the back end as the server engine to allow you to be able to interact with a web server. And so what it wants to know is where the code injection is at. What's allowing us to do this code injection? By the way, you might see SQL injections abbreviated as SQL, all capital letters like this. with a little I, SQL little I. You'll see that quite a bit, and you know that it's talking about an injection. Well, where do we get this user info page? So we come up here, and we go to A1 SQL injection, extract data, user info, just like that. So it's OWASP 2017, A1, SQL I, there it is right there, SQL injection, user info. And here's our page. And now what we can begin to do is we can type in different things that might get us into this page. For example, suppose that we typed in @ like this and hit enter, @. Nope, it doesn't let us, and it keeps track of all of our older statements. So it's saying 0 records found for @. Well, and then it says authentication error, bad username or password, because we're trying to hack this database. So we could try something else. Now you noticed when I was demonstrating the SQL to you that tick can be used to describe a string. So tick might be pretty interesting for us. So let's try tick and see if that'll get us in there, and sure enough it does. Look at that. And then we can look and we can see the answer that is coming from mysqlhandler.php. Now, and we could try a couple of others. So we could try the $, which is used by some databases. No good. Here's the big one. This guy is tick or 1 equals 1. You can do an and 1 equals 1. You can do an or 1 equals 1. You can do it uppercase, lowercase. This is another way of trying to hack into or do a SQL injection, a real quick and dirty SQL injection, just to see if the database is going to allow injections. And what this thing is saying, okay, I've got a tick here, so that's terminating whatever is happening on the SQL side. And is it true that 1 equals 1? So this is a Boolean, and it's saying, is it true that 1 equals 1? Or, sometimes you'll see the word or here. We can type in or 1 equals 1. And this should work for us as well, and it does. So we're in. And then also a hashtag is often used for a comment in SQL. And so does this get us in? No, hashtag doesn't work. So tick works, and or 1 equals 1 works, and 1 equals 1 works, and the file is mysqlhandler.php. That's the one that we're looking for. And then you can look down here and see the messages that SQL is giving you. And you can see the SQL clause here. Here's the query. Select star, which means select everything. Star is a keyword, or it's called a wildcard. And star means select everything from the table, all columns. From some table name, well, now we know the table name is accounts, where username equals tick, password equals tick, and it generated a MySQL exception. Okay, so we know that it came from mysqlhandler.php, but the main important thing here when you're doing these SQL injections is you have to know SQL. It's not hard to learn. You should know about how these databases work, like Oracle, MySQL, Microsoft SQL Server. There are tons of others that you should know about, but they all basically function essentially the same way, with the exception of how they do some housekeeping and how they like to arrange things. But it's pretty amazing. They're all relatively alike. And then you need probably to know about PHP at some point. When I was going through studying this, I looked at one place where a guy went into the PHP and actually was looking through there as well. And we don't need to do that right now. We don't have that level of sophistication yet. But later on, who knows, maybe we'll do that. And then finally what we can do is go back to labs, SQL injection, testing for SQL errors, and we can answer the question, MySQL handler PHP, and submit. Yay, we did it. That's all I've got for today. Have a great day, and I hope you go out to W3 Schools, set up an account for yourself, and begin to study SQL. Thank you. I'll talk to you in the next video.